Hey guys, Candidate Tournament 2022 is over. I'm sure many of you followed it and enjoyed the beauty of chess and the games of leaders with almost no mistakes. Now let's sum it up. Well, Jan Nepomniatchi won the tournament, scoring 9.5 of 14 with no losses and 5 wins. Ding Liren took the second place with 8 points and Timur Rajabov was third with 7.5. Nepo demonstrated an outstanding performance and I am proud of him. He gave no chances to his opponents to outplay him and started leading from the first round after a win against Ding Liren. Now, Jan Nepomniatchi is the second-time challenger, so let's take a look at how he uses his second chance to become a world champion. For those who missed Candidate Tournament 2022 and didn't follow the games, I prepared this small video where I'm going through Nepo's wins and focus on critical moments of his games. Okay, this is FIDE Viktor Neustroyev and Candidate Tournament 2022 Nepo's best wins. This is the game of the first round where Jan Nepomniatchi outplayed Ding Liren with black pieces in a strong attack. c4, e5, g3, c6. This is what actually I play myself. Knight f3, e4, knight d4, d5, c takes d5, and the queen can capture on d5, attacking the knight. Knight c2. Well, the opening here is not important, but the line that was played is quite interesting. It's a rare line. Knight c3, queen e5, bishop g2, knight a6, to get the knight to the center through c5. Castle, bishop a7, knight a3, castle, a3, and novelty, rook e8, b4, and knight g4 in order to exchange the knights, but bishop b2, queen goes to h5 to threaten the mate. Well, exchanging the knights probably was a better idea, but h4 was played, bishop f6, queen c2, knight takes knight, d takes e3, bishop f5 to protect the pawn and to prepare opening the position with bishop h4. Knight a4, bishop takes b2, knight takes b2, and knight comes closer to the center, knight c4, rook e6 in order to join the rook into the attack, rook fd1, and in this position g5 could be the best move to try to open the h file and get the rook to h6 then. Knight d5, rook d4, still g5 is the best move. For example, if they take, you can continue with queen g5 and then rook h6. h6 was played by Nepo, then queen d2, rook a8 supporting the e4 pawn, bishop king h2, bishop g4, attacking the pawn on e2, but knight a5 with the idea to capture the pawn on b7. Again, g5 looks like a good option. I don't know why Jan Nepomniatchi didn't play it right now or earlier. He played rook f6, attacking here, and after king g1, he finally played g5 to expose the king. Well, here something like that could make sense in order to try to pressure c6 and take the knight on d5, but Ding Liren made his main blunder. He captured on b7, a free pawn, why not, but g takes h4, and after knight c5, h3 is probably a move that he blundered. The bishop is hanging, and black also intends to play h2. If, for example, they capture on e4 with this knight, rook comes there, f3, h takes g2, knight f2. Knight takes e3, and after f takes g4, you can just continue with queen e5 and take on g3, or take the advantage of this pin because you also threaten with knight c2 fork. If here, let's say bishop e4, then h2 check, and if king g2, queen h3, of course, so that's why king h1, then rook f2 with a deadly attack. So rook takes e4 was played. H takes g2, even sacrificing this useless rook on the e file. Rook takes e8, king g7, And queen h1 is a mate. If, for example, they capture on g2, it's rook f2, and then queen enters the enemy camp and delivers a checkmate together with the bishop. For example, here queen g1 is a mate. In the game it was f4, but it didn't work. Queen takes rook on a1 and still continues the attack. For example, after bishop h3, white resigned, because the next move is this, and the queen checkmates on g2. Well, in case if king takes, it's queen h1, king g4, h5, king g5, and after queen h3, there is nothing they can do to cover the g4 square, and queen g4 is going to be a mate. So this is how Jan Nepomniachtchi won in the first round against Ding Liren, who finally finished the tournament on the second place. Now the game of the fourth round, where Jan Nepomniachtchi was playing with white pieces against Alireza Firuza. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4. So we see just an ordinary knight erf. Everything is according to the theory. g4, b5, g5. Here the main move is knight h5, but this time it was b4. b4, knight e2, knight goes to e8. And Jan tries to open the position f4. This is actually a well-known strategy. a5, f5 to provoke them to take on b3, but bishop c4. And this is where a knight g3 could make sense, but I understand why Jan Nepomniachtchi didn't play such a move. For example, bishop f1, rook h2, f1, a4, and the knight has to stay on a1, which is a really bad knight. However, these prospects of the king side attack overcome a bad position of the knight on a1. But king b1 isn't a bad move. Now the knight can go to c1. Black opens the position with d5, f6, a counterplay. The king is exposed, and the knight enters the enemy camp with the idea to join more pieces into the attack. Maybe the queen or the rook. Bishop f1, rook hf1, a3. So this is actually a theoretical position and happened once in one game, but a3 is a novelty. b3. King to h8 to get the king to a safe place. E takes d5. They have to block the pawn with the knight. Queen takes b4, and well, they could continue with probably this and continue the attack with knight c4, or maybe queen c7, but they played rook c8, which didn't make much sense. There is nothing to do on the c file. Bishop b6, queen d7, and queen e1. So the bishop now goes there and covers the c3 square successfully. The knight cannot occupy it. Rook b8, bishop a5, knight c4, but who cares? The bishop is protected, so that's why d6, and if knight takes there, pawn takes e7, and then queen takes a5, gaining a minor piece. That's why bishop d8, bishop c3. There is no need to exchange this bishop because it has to cover the king. Queen e6, knight d3, knight d5, knight f4, a tactical strike, because the pawn is pinned. Knight takes f4, rook takes f4, and f6. Now the rook is hanging. Well, actually not, because the queen is not protected. That's why queen e2 was played. Knight has to move. And finally, rook h4, intending to play rook h7 and then queen h5. f5 was played here, but it didn't help. Still a sacrifice. So something like that means to blunder the rook. That's why, for example, king g8 was played in the game, and knight f5 with a strong attack. For example, bishop f6 and rook g1. This is where Firuza resigned because he couldn't come up with a move, and white checkmates in 4 moves here. Queen h6, king f7, rook g7. So if they take, it's a checkmate, king f8, but queen h8 is enough. And that's it. So this time a strong attack on the king side works, and actually this is the most typical plan in case if you are castle to the opposite side. The next game where Jan Nepomniachtchi played with white pieces against Jan Krzysztof Duda happened in round 6. We shouldn't focus on the opening, but later the game transformed to Catalan. Knight e5 is a clever move, and here looks like only bishops and major pieces left on the board, so the position becomes more simple, but not with the enemy bishop being on the edge and can be easily trapped. So f4 was played in order to trap the bishop, h6, queen e1, and queen finally joins the king side. h4 with the idea to continue with g5. This strategy actually helped Jan Nepomniachtchi to succeed. f5, queen b2, and now the main idea of such a move was to play e6. f takes e6, but g6 and the bishop is trapped. Of course, black has some compensation for that bishop, but in fact that compensation wasn't enough. Rook f5 is a very sneaky move because the rook goes to the g file and pressures the g7. Of course, it's a poisoned rook. If black captures on e5, it's queen g7 mate. Queen h6, king g1, and rook takes a2 was maybe the last mistake. It was possible to play rook e6 and try somehow consolidate, but rook a2 and rook b to f7 threatening with a check. Rook a1, bishop f1, they finally played d4, and this time rook g5 attacking the g7. Queen came to d6, queen f2, we do not need to exchange the queens because with a queen on the board it's easier to deliver a checkmate. Queen a3 and rook g3, so the next move is just rook f takes g7. This is a critical pawn for this position. After the pawn is lost, there is nothing to talk about. Okay, then I would like to demonstrate two games Jan Nepomniachtchi won with black pieces. For example, this is the game of round 7, where Jan was playing against Richard Rappert. It was a Russian game, and probably black already agreed to a draw. By playing this opening, black can easier get a draw. Knight e5, d6, knight f3, knight e4, d4, d5, so the position is symmetrical. The pawn structure at least is symmetrical, then c4, c6, and actually it's equal. Queen b3, bishop g4. With this move, black started sharpening the position. What happened then? Well, here, for example, if queen takes b7, it's bishop f3, and if you take there, it's a strong attack. For example, bishop h2, queen h4, and so on, which ends with a checkmate, of course. I can even show you this check. He goes there, and queen g4. The only move is to play g3, but queen h3, and the game is over. So g takes f3. And now queen h4 wins, because f4 doesn't really help much. Queen replaces to f3, takes here, and if queen takes rook, it's just f5 with the idea to make a rook lift, and while these pieces are not developed, black may join more material to deliver a checkmate. So of course taking on b7 wasn't a good idea, and Rappert understood that this pawn was poisoned. But he took the pawn on e4. So queen d4, queen b7, queen takes e4, queen e8, and bishop h3. I believe actually this is what Jan Nepomniachtchi knew. It was his home preparation. G takes h3, queen g6, and this is where white should repeat the position and agree to a draw. But they played f3. However, still queen d3 attacking, and they should repeat the position, but white decided to deviate and played knight d2. That move was a mistake. Queen d7, and now the queen is trapped. Even if rook e1 is played, it's bishop d6. Knight e4, knight a6, and they have to sacrifice the queen for a rook, so now it's queen versus two rooks, and with the king being exposed, it's more in black favor. bishop f4, queen h3, rook ad1, h6. Actually, here the h-pawn move decides the game. And finally, the knight should get to f4. Oh, actually, they exchange. But if here bishop takes h4, knight comes to f4, and what then? If this move, queen h3, is a double attack. If something like that, just knight g6, which is also a double attack. So bishop b8 to keep the bishop on this diagonal, knight g5, the knights were exchanged, queen entered the enemy camp with the idea of h3. That's why white should play h3 themselves. And here the queen is much more active, and finally h3 pawn dies, and this is where white resigned. Why did they resign? Well, h2 is coming. Oh, first of all, queen f3 is coming with the idea to take something on f2 or play h2 after that. For example, if rook f2 right away, it's h2, and if bishop takes queen f2 mate, if rook takes, it's queen to e1, and white loses. So here white lost because they decided to not repeat the position and agree to a draw, but decided to play for a win, which was their mistake because Jan's home preparation was just really perfect. And another game, Jan outplayed Alireza Firouzja in round 11. Here he did it with black pieces. It was Russian game. But c4, white is playing for a win. c4 doesn't allow to play d5. White occupied the center, and if they got a few extra tempers, I would say they are better, but in fact, they don't have these tempers. So this position is equal, but this is where white started making mistakes. g4, h6, and h4 looks very aggressive, and this is not supported and not appropriate for this concrete position because the center is already open. Here the white king is more exposed even. But this is the game where Jan Nepomniatchi demonstrated his perfect tactical vision and his ability to calculate. Here he's sacrificing the knight but takes the pawn on b2, attacking the other knight. Knight comes to the center, and rook c4 looks like a mistake. Well, of course, the bishop is pinned. But the knight, this knight, and these bishops all are located on the same diagonal. Bishop e3, well, it's a logical move, but then again, Jan applies another tactical strike with bishop g5 in order to take on e4 with the other rook. Rook b1, queen e2, rook a1, they just repeated the position. Rook takes d4. Well, if queen takes d4, it's queen e2. If bishop takes d4, it's queen d5, creating a pin and taking this knight on the next move. For example, if bishop h3, knight h4 just. So they decided to take the queen, rook takes queen, bishop d1. If you look at the board, looks like here black is down the exchange, but they have 4 pawns to compensate it. Knight d6, 3 pawns, rook e7, and bishop b3 to support on d5, because knight f4 was a threat. Bishop c5, knight b7. Now 2 pawns only, but pawns are not so important comparing to pieces activity. Bishop b6, bishop c4, rook comes to e3, king h1, bishop h3, and with 2 bishops, black was able to obtain such a strong advantage, which was enough to win the game. For example, bishop f1, bishop f4, and this is where white resigned. Why? Well, if they play this move, they fall under a discovered attack, maybe this or this, and lose the rook. Maybe there is something else that can be played, let's say rook h3, rook h1 mate. If they block with the bishop, rook h3 is a mate, so the only logical response is this, but then bishop takes d5, a fork, and it's time to resign. But Firouzja resigned one move earlier. So you see, in all these games, Jan demonstrated a perfect calculation ability and his passion to attack and succeed with this attack. That's why actually he won all these 5 games. In this video, you learn how Jan Nepomniatchi became a winner of Candidate Tournament 2022. I demonstrated the games he won. Nepo has his own distinctive style of playing chess. He mainly won his games because of a strong attack combined with perfect tactical vision and calculation ability. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and share it with your friends, chess players. Please let me know which of his games you consider to be the best. You can post it into the comment section below this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't miss the next one. I publish new videos on a weekly basis or even more often. However, if you don't want to wait, you can check the video about epic blunders of world champions. For example, this one on the screen next, where I demonstrated the most incredible blunders by Anatoly Karpov, strong grandmaster and ex-world champion. Okay, enjoy Anatoly Karpov's most epic blunders, and I'll see you there in a moment.